Truman needs to know what's next.
What's next?
Why?
Sadly, I did have to cancel my trip to watch Oppenheimer in IMAX 70mm, but I was still able to watch it just in normal IMAX. So here is my review on Oppenheimer. Let's start off with everything I liked about the movie. And for starters, speaking of IMAX, at moments it feels like Christopher Nolan is just showing off his visuals. Because we have these visual scenes that are presented in like this huge screen in IMAX. And by the way, if you can watch this movie in IMAX, watch it in IMAX. Like, watch it on the biggest screen as possible. Because the way Christopher Nolan, like, shows Oppenheimer's, like, thinking of his mind, of how things are gonna, like, react. We see, like, this huge scale of, like, stars, of big explosions, of everything. Even when the bomb goes off, it's like this beautiful scene, even though it's not so beautiful if you really think about the reality of it. But the big old bomb exploding on the huge screen just looks so cool as it's like exploding. So it just feels like Christopher Nolan is just showing off what he can do. Like, and then also you say that this movie doesn't have any CGI in it. Now, I kind of believe that, like, unless if you have really good makeup for a couple moments on in a movie, and I figure out how they do, like, this shots of these, like, beautiful, massive screens, I'll believe that. Maybe a behind the scenes will kind of explain more upon that, but yeah, it feels like Christopher Nolan is just showing off this big scale kind of movie, and he's just, like, really good at that. Now, this movie is very much dialogue about a true event that happened in real life, about the atomic bomb, about Oppenheimer as a person, and this movie feels like a documentary. And watching this movie, it feels like that. Like, I really liked how this movie was told. It was told in like this documentary kind of style. It's kind of like, okay, we already know what's going to happen, but let's build upon that kind of and have him tell you kind of the way to that. I like kind of like the idea of that, of how they told it in like this documentary kind of style. It made it feel like more of a real kind of thing. Now, I did not like the movie Air due to we know that what's gonna happen. It ruins the stakes. So then Oppenheimer, you're probably like, how'd you like this movie? It's like, it's the same problem with Air for you. But do keep in mind, I didn't like Air because I knew what was gonna happen. If you've seen this movie, they tell the story in a way that you need to know what already happened. Like, because you know Christopher Nolan, he tells his events out of order that you need to rewatch the movie to fully piece it all together. So that made me like the movie way more than Air, because it's like starts off at the end of the atomic bomb. So it's like the director's expecting the audience to know that the atomic bomb is already created. And it's already created. We all knew that going into this movie. And that's why this movie feels so much more different than Air. Because it starts off in the setting, letting everyone know, hey, we're starting off at the end. That's how we're starting it off. So then, yeah, that's why I like this movie way more than Air. Because Air did it in chronological order. And there's no stakes to that if you've already seen the movie. But then Oppenheimer, it shuffles around the events that on rewatch you will piece all together. But for now, the first time watching it, it starts off in that way. That just makes the story work. And every actor in this movie is really good. We got Emily Blunt, Robert Downey Jr. is in here. Then we have Cillian Murphy, and so many more actors. And Cillian Murphy does a really good job at Oppenheimer. Like, it feels like he is Oppenheimer himself. And then I was surprised of how little roles the rest of the characters had. Because Oppenheimer just stole the show, he was the main character. And I felt like all the other actresses were like kind of like side characters. Like Robert Downey Jr., I'll talk more about him in a second, but people are saying he deserves a reward. When I was watching reviews, I was like, okay, he must have a pretty big role then. I was surprised of how small of a role he had in here. Which is like a good thing. What I'm talking about is that Christopher Nolan has a way of having these big actresses in this movie and having such a small role. And then they fit the role perfectly as well. So it was meant to be that way. Which I'm like, how do you have like Robert Downey Jr. as it feels like this big old role that people are saying deserves a reward. And then he's just in like this, it feels like he's only like in this small role. I say he's more of a medium role, but compared to like Oppenheimer, he has like a pretty small role in my opinion of what people are saying he needed a reward for. Now, I do want to talk about Robert Downey Jr. because people are saying that he deserves a reward, and he does, yeah. He's like incredible as his role. I did not see him as Tony Stark / Iron Man. I saw him entirely as the character he was playing in this movie. Like I said, all the actors fit really well. And yeah, Christopher Nolan did a really good job at casting people. Like even some really well-known actors are just sitting in the background and do not even talk at all. That's impressive. And the way this movie switches from color to black and white is super creative. Like, black and white is Robert Downey Jr.'s, color is Oppenheimer, and the way he does that is just really smart. It's a really smart way of telling the story and know exactly who you're following. The score in here, I really like the score. Like, my favorite music in this movie is in the trailer, but I really like the score in here. It has those beats to it. It has the dramatic feel to it and the dramatic scenes, all the tension building scenes. Wow. This movie should get a reward for the best music of a movie this year at the Oscars. I don't know exactly what it's called, that's why I said that, but it deserves a reward for its music. Because it has like the best music in here. It has the thumps, it has the suspense, it has the dramatic feel to it when it needs to, and it's perfect. Now, throughout the movie, you're like rooting for this group of people to be able to make the atomic bomb. And then it like launches the building up to that moment. It's so dramatic. And then you see the visuals. And then after that, and then the movie does away at making you completely shift in perspectives. And it makes you feel terror as you're watching the movie. It spills up this suspense to the ending. And then the movie ends and you're like, at any moment, somebody could just launch this thing on us and we wouldn't even know. So this movie has like a really good job at leaving you off in suspense and terror. And leaving you off satisfied in a way and kind of terrified at the same time. Now this movie is 3 hours long of a talk movie. No action or anything. Just 3 hours of talking. And surprisingly that went by really fast for the most part. Like, I will talk more about that in a second. But for a 3-hour movie, it felt like 2 hours at the most. And I was surprised of how fast this movie flew by. I was really surprised by that. Because stuff were just happening and happening. And then we finally got to the ending. I'm like, wow, this movie's already over. Did not feel like 3 hours at all. But I would not say this movie is perfect. So we do have to go on to what I didn't like about the movie. And I did say I couldn't feel the runtime. But the last hour or so of this movie, the pacing is completely different from the first 2 hours of this movie. Like, you do kind of feel the runtime in the last hour, but it does not feel like an hour. It feels more like 30 minutes. But while the first 2 hours felt like 45 minutes, so there was a difference there in like shifts. But overall, yeah. Basically, you couldn't feel the runtime. Since this movie is told out of order, you're like kind of piece everything together as you're watching the movie. And sometimes your brain just scrambles everything up. I had to really think about it once the movie was over. I finally got all the plot points all together after doing some research. But yeah, again, it's Christopher Nolan. So, basically, if you've seen his other movies, you know what to expect. And I think it really would have helped if I done some research on Oppenheimer as a person before watching this movie. Other people will disagree. They will probably say, don't do any research, just be surprised by this movie. I for one think that you should do at least a little research. It will help you understand the movie because it's told out of order. It could help if you do a little bit of research first. This movie is rated R. It does not feel R at all. It feels a PG-13. I feel like Christopher Nolan could have pushed the R rating a little bit more and made some more graphic things. Like, they don't even show the graphic things, so it kind of feels PG-13. But then you add the language and everything else in there. That makes it R, but that's kind of all at the beginning of the movie. So then once you get to like the last half, it just feels like a PG-13 movie. And I feel like Nolan could have pushed that R rating further. Like Memento and stuff like that. I feel like he could have pushed it further. Again, this is a talky movie. And for me, my brain, and then you need like your full attention. Like, it's kind of like Mission Impossible. You miss one bit of dialogue, you're trying to piece together everything that's like happening next after that. But it's not all kind of like that, just a little bit. It's kind of trying to like piece together everything that's happening after that. If you miss one bit of dialogue, especially when it's out of order as well, if you're watching a scene like that. But you should be fine for the most part. One last thing I did not like. I feel like this movie, when I was going into this movie, I thought it was going to be more about the creation of the atomic bomb. But instead, I got a movie about J. Robert Oppenheimer. It was more his story, not their creation of the atomic bomb. I wanted this movie to go more in depth about the creation of the bomb, and I kind of explain more on how it was created. But instead, I felt like this movie focused more on Oppenheimer. That's just a me thing, because that's what I was expecting from the movie. I expected it to be more about the bomb instead of Oppenheimer, but that's not what I got. But I kind of wish it focused more on like the bomb just a little bit more. It didn't really go in more depth that I wanted to about the creation of it. But all in all, who knew Christopher Nolan could make a talk movie into like almost a masterpiece? Like Oppenheimer, people are calling it a masterpiece. Yeah, I mean, like, yes, I do kind of agree with that. It has the best visuals, best actor, best story, everything good about that. And just tiny little nitpicks. But on first watch, I don't call this movie a masterpiece. I mean, like, yes, if you know the history behind it, maybe on first watch you call it a masterpiece, but yeah, just on first watch for me and having to put all the events in order, which helped me like the movie more, but at the same time, prevents me from calling it a masterpiece. I mean, like, I do still recommend this movie. Yes, it is talky. It's still really good. But instead of giving it a 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, anything like that, I have to give it a 9 out of 10, just because, I just said it. But on rewatch, it will probably go up to a 9.5. Eventually, maybe 10 out of 10. But for now, 9 out of 10. And that also really depends on how I rate this movie as well. Like, out of all depends. Like Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, compared to Oppenheimer, which one would I rather watch? Mission Impossible. But which one's the better movie? Oppenheimer. So, like, really depends on how I rank this. But for now, 9 out of 10. It's kind of like that even bit for it to be fair. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Comment down below your thoughts. Follow my letterboxd called The Koehler Man Movie. And I will see you guys all next time. Goodbye.